If you know I'm getting on a big old jet airplane and headed to Europe for the week, I will be in Germany meeting the man who has saved my wife's life twice. And you can follow that journey out on Facebook and Twitter and social media, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, anywhere the internet is served. In the meantime, we are monitoring the Orioles and the Toronto Blue Jays. And, I think the headline says it all, Luke Jones. The Orioles, to me, are teetering on the brink here with Tillman, with O'Day, with Jones, with Jimenez pitching, with all of this happening. But lo and behold, on Sunday, it was a kick save and a beauty by Gausman, by Pierce, by Machado. There were plenty of stars there. But what does this mean for the Toronto series?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know the first thing I looked at Sunday morning was when the pitching matchups for this Toronto series were announced, and you kind of just cringe. You look at the fact that you're pitching Wade Miley against Estrada. You have Jimenez going up against J-Happ, who's been terrific this year, and Gallardo going against Sanchez, and you just kind of cringe. But it's funny because a week ago at this time, we were talking about the horrendous Astros series. We were talking about, was that the end? And what a weird week. The Orioles go 4-3 since then, but the way it looked was just, you had the 3 straight against Washington. You lose the Thursday night game to Scherzer, and you say, okay, fine. Ubaldo pitched pretty well, actually, surprisingly well. And then you go to the Bronx, and you completely get your skull caved in against the Yankees hitting, just completely crushing all Orioles pitchers who took the mound Friday and Saturday. And you're thinking, all right, this last week, was it a case of, you think about a horror movie, and you have the killer or the monster or whatever is ready to die, and then comes back for that one last scare. And I was starting to think,
last scene in Halloween.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
I was starting to think, was the Orioles beating the Nats 3 games straight, was that their final awakening, and then they were dead? And the first 2 games of the Yankee series was really making me think that. And then, as you pointed out, Kevin Gausman goes out and throws a gem, and Steve Pierce provides some offense. Mark Trumbo hits his 40th homer of the season, and they stop the bleeding at least. But then you turn around and say, okay, they are coming home. But you look at what Toronto just did, albeit against a really bad Minnesota Twins team. But you see how they were able to a week ago at this standpoint. But when you look at how they've continued to pitch, or better yet, how they haven't pitched, it's tough to have a whole lot of confidence. And
Friday and Saturday were hideous, right? Those were 2 nights where you're sitting there saying, this is not a playoff team, and they're not. And based on the pitching rotation, it's not close to that. But Sunday's sort of a kick, save, and a beauty, right? Like, after Sunday, you feel better, but by and large, it's hard to look at the totality of this and get real optimistic over the next 5 weeks.
The reality is their bullpen's completely fallen apart. And not the back end. The back end's been fine. Zach Britton's been the best closer in baseball. Brad Brock's had some hiccups in the second half, but it's not as though he's been horrendous or anything like that. Michael Givens, who did struggle some over the weekend, but overall, and he was pitching in a spot where it wasn't a big moment. They needed him to pitch because they had no one else. So that's another story, that they've had some of their good pitchers have had to pitch in some meaningless situations. It's been that bad. But they have just found no one, and I mean no one, to even give them some decent long to middle relief. I said this to you, we were talking about this before the Ravens game in the press box at the stadium Saturday night. It's one thing not to have starting pitching depth, and the Orioles aren't alone. There are a lot of teams in baseball, even some other decent teams in baseball, who struggle to have starting pitching depth. It's not easy to have. But when you can't even find minor league pitchers to come up and give you 1 or 2 decent innings to keep you engaged in the game, when you have guys that you're just cycling in and all of them are just completely getting bombed, that's just a complete organizational failure right there. And it's just, it's led to their bullpen, which was first or near the top all year. They've fallen to the middle of the pack in bullpen ERA. We know that their starter ERA is near the bottom, even after, about a month there where they were pitching a little bit better. That's gone away, and certainly you mentioned the Tillman injury, even though he's supposed to throw a bullpen here as the Orioles return home, and or I guess, throwing. I don't know if he's doing a full-blown bullpen, but, so they'll test that out. But when you can't even find guys that can give you 1 or 2 innings of decent long relief just to preserve the rest of your bullpen, just to keep you in a game, if it's 5-2 and you still have a chance to come back, that is so far below the line, and it's amazing. The Orioles, and look, I'm going to defend Tommy Hunter here for a second, because Tommy Hunter, statistically speaking, go back and look at
not
what
a bad year. Not a bad year.
In 2013 and 2014, he had ERAs below 3. He's a guy who was maligned, and I get it. He gave up some big home runs from time to time. I'm not saying that this guy was Zach Britton or any all-star reliever you want to think of, but he was solid. But the fact that this team was so desperate to find some effective relief that they signed him, who was just released by Cleveland. Now, he had been hurt, but it just shows that you're looking at Tommy Hunter, who, by the way, I think can help them compared to what else they've been trotting out there on a nightly basis, what they've been cycling in and out of Norfolk.
Yeah, I'm not a big Despaigne fan at this point.
Yeah. So, I think, I actually, I praise the move in a vacuum, compared to what else they have, but it just speaks volumes to that's what it's come to, that Tommy Hunter, who hasn't pitched in the major leagues in over a month because he's been hurt, that you're bringing him back because you have no one else.
Well, in 12 days, they've lost by 7 runs 5 times. It's an outrageous. Even the really bad teams didn't lose like that. Not 30-3 withstanding, but on any given night during the bad era, this is like sort of unprecedented for what Buck has been through. We haven't seen Buck sitting in the dugout wondering when Ryan Flaherty's coming in very often around here.
And it's honestly, it's impacted his decision making even, because I thought this, and I guess we didn't have a chance to talk about this in Thursday's finale in D.C. I really thought he should have used Brad Brock in the bottom of the 8th of a 1-0 game, and I heard Buck's rationale where they were losing and they wanted to keep him fresh. They're trying to only use him when they're ahead. But my whole thought, and this was the same exact thing they did. Think back to it was about a month ago now. They had that makeup game in Minnesota, another game where Ubaldo pitched pretty well and they had a chance to win. It was a close game late, and Buck used some of his lesser relievers with the thought that he was going to save his bullpen for a Toronto series. Well, what happened in that Toronto series? They got beaten 3 straight times, and all those fresh, effective relievers that you saved didn't have any reason to pitch then. So, I think, and I'm not trying to beat up Buck here big time for that. It's a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of.
And they didn't score in the 9th, by the way. So the Andrusic thing, they could have lost 11-0. But I hear you. When it's 1-0 with that lineup and you got 3 outs left, I'll take my chances if somebody's going to get underneath one, right?
But it just speaks to where they are right now from a pitching standpoint. That even Buck, who is as good as they come managing a bullpen. He really is. And I'm, it's real. It's kind of nitpicking, but it just. I guess I'm saying it to illustrate how bad their pitching has been. And as much as I've spent the last 5 minutes beating up their bullpen, it's because their starting rotation's been terrible. Yovani Gallardo was terrible on Friday night. In fact, I thought Buck Showalter should have left him out there to wear it a little bit more, to not blow up the rest of the bullpen, because he had only thrown, 40-some pitches before he was lifted. I would have left him out there longer, quite frankly. The game was already out of hand just about. So, and then, Dylan Bundy, who was not good on Saturday, but when he left the game, it was still very much a game. It wasn't a case where it was mop-up. They needed relievers to come in and keep the Orioles engaged in the game, and they couldn't even do it. It was just, it was embarrassing. The pitching performance was embarrassing on Friday and Saturday night from a variety of characters, starters and relievers. And, that's where we bring it kind of full circle to, as terrible as everything looked, they still lose 2 out of 3. They still got their brains beaten in on Friday and Saturday. But Kevin Gausman, for as much as we talk about what this kid hasn't become yet, he hasn't become that top-of-the-rotation guy yet, and maybe he won't become that. Maybe this is who he is, but at the same time, he pitched really, really well on Sunday, gave them a chance to win, saved the bullpen, And ultimately, a 7 shutout inning, strikes out 9.
Yeah, after watching them get their brains beat in for 3 straight days, right?
Yeah, and it's a case where you know that, hey, I got to go out there and give this team a good start. The bullpen's used up. We've cycled in more guys. We called up Oliver Drake. We've re-signed Tommy Hunter, who hadn't pitched since the first half.
And where's Orozco when you need him? At Stanhouse,
I know, right? Yeah, you saw that tweet.
I did see that
tweet. As I
tweet.
said on Twitter, at this rate, I wouldn't be surprised to see Jesse Orozco back in the.
That's why I love you, man. Even in the dark times, you got to have a sense of humor around here.
Of course. And hey, as much as we've talked about how bad things are, and we kind of talked about this before the Washington series, they take 3 out of 4 there. If this team comes home and somehow, despite what the pitching matchups look like on paper, and I'm not going to say I'd put good money on it, but if they take 2 out of 3, against Toronto, you're feeling a lot better about things all of a sudden again, and you're 2 games out at that point, and you're saying bring it on to everyone else. But we've been talking about this for a while now. They've done a good enough job to kind of tread water and continue to remain there, but they haven't had that time where they've taken off in quite some time. I think the last time you can really think back to was when they swept the Indians, a week and a half after the second half started, and they beat Colorado in that first game of that home series. I think that was their high water mark. They'd gotten to 18 over 500. They were the best team in the American League at that point, and since then they've really struggled. They've played 6 under 500 since then, they've been hanging on, but you just feel like this is a frayed rope that continues to each strand keeps ripping, and you just wonder if it's going to fall apart.
Well, this is a week where it might not define them, but if the Blue Jays sweep them, it will define them, right? I mean, and when you look at these pitching matchups, you say, where are the good ones coming? Miley on Monday, Jimenez on Tuesday, Gallardo on... at what point are one of those guys going to get him to the 7th inning against this kind of an offense the Blue Jays are going to be putting on in their shack up there when they're going well, and certainly their pitching's going well? Estrada, Happ, and Sanchez. This is an ugly week for them unless they turn it around very quickly.
Yeah, and I mean the only saving grace is that they are playing at home, which they if you look at how they've played against Toronto this year, they've played them pretty well at home. Now going to Rogers Center is a completely different story. But,
the House of Horrors, as we remember it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But they have played them better at home. We'll see. I mean, Toronto, the way they hit the baseball against the Twins over the weekend. You kind of just cringe, and anyone who is in the sitting in the outfield seats, you might want to wear a helmet. But who knows? I mean, we were talking about the Jimenez Max Scherzer pitching matchup, how much of a mismatch that was, and you saw what Ubaldo did. I mean, maybe the Orioles bats really, really wake up. I mean, over the last week and a half or so, they've been swinging it better.
They might win 12-10 in a couple of these. Literally, I'm not making that up. I mean, it could be that kind of week, right?
I mean, when we've talked about this, they're almost going to have to win games like that. I mean, we've talked about O'Day being out and what that's meant for the bullpen, and even if Tommy Hunter can come back now and give them another guy that maybe you can trust in the 6th or 7th inning, you're still missing O'Day, and until Chris Tillman A, returns, and B, more importantly, shows that he's actually Chris Tillman and not just a guy with a sore shoulder trying to be Chris Tillman. You're clearly short in the rotation. They were short in the rotation before that. So you need this offense to maul. That's what they did in June. I mean, they had a great month of June. They didn't pitch well in June, but they mauled everyone because they were scoring 6 runs.
Well, they mauled on Saturday, except they were all solo home runs, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's it really comes down to, can you get good enough pitching that it doesn't completely take you out of the game entirely, but, can you score enough runs? And, on Sunday, they scored 5 runs. I mean, they didn't do much against CC Sabathia at all, other than Steve Pearce with the solo shot and then breaking through with a 2-run single, but they did just enough. They got a good performance from Gausman. You hope that Bundy, who didn't pitch well Saturday, but also there were a couple things that went wrong in that game that kind of allowed that to get out of control. He wasn't so bad where you say, okay, he's completely falling apart either. So you hope he can get back on track because you need him to, as much as that might be unfair.
I like my chances from him the next time he takes the ball better than Miley or Jimenez or Gallardo.
Of course. So, so you have those two. You pray that Tillman can be back here in the next 10 days or so. And, if you have those three, Gallardo had actually been somewhat decent in August before Friday night. And Friday night he was horrendous. So, it's just, it is what it is. I don't know what else to say about it that we haven't talked about since the offseason.
Well, but you look at some of their wins in the last month: 10-8, 13-5, 8-7, 9-6. That's how they're going to win.
Yeah, exactly. And if you can get to the seventh or eighth inning with the lead, then you feel pretty good about the bullpen. But if you're going to have a starter get knocked out in the fourth or fifth inning at this point, you don't feel good about the bullpen. So it's just it's where they are right now. They have such a small margin for error as far as what they need to do to try to win. If you're going to assume that you're not going to get a miraculous start from Ubaldo Jimenez or Gallardo or Wade Miley,
or a miracle day from Steve Pearce as well, right?
Yeah, well, and that's but at the same time, if you're going to ask me what's more likely to happen, this team score 8 runs or Ubaldo give them 7 shutout innings or Gallardo give them 7 shutout innings, I'm going to lean more on the scoring 7 or 8 runs. So that's what they're going to have to do. Is it fair to ask that much of the offense? Probably not, but we saw them do it for much of the first half. We've seen them do it at times here over the last week or two. They're going to have to do it. It's where they are. They're still within striking distance. I'm not saying that I would install the Orioles as the favorite whatsoever compared to Toronto or Boston right now. But every time we've also seen Toronto or Boston look like they're ready to take off, they've stubbed their toe. So maybe this is the latest example of Toronto comes to Baltimore and stubs their toe a little bit. It would surely help the Orioles. This is really a series that do they need to win this series? Maybe not, but if you get swept and you're 6 out come Thursday, you're really in big-time trouble, and that's stating the obvious.
He is Luke Jones. He will be on the scene all week long. We will not be in New Orleans with meaningless preseason football on Thursday, but Luke will be at the ballpark all week, monitoring all things that are happening with the Birds and the Blue Jays. I'm headed off to Germany, and I come back at the end of the week. What are we going to be saying about Tommy Hunter next week? This is fascinating, right? I guess it goes through the mistakes of Gonzalez not being around here, missing Chen, the ins and the outs of all the things that have happened with pitching here, the Arrietas, all the names that have come through, the Bud Norrises. Tommy Hunter comes back at this point. I'm kind of okay with it, given what I've seen, because he certainly is better than much of what we've seen the last 60 days coming out of the bullpen.
Yeah, the bar is so low. And I don't know if I'd say last 60 days, but certainly the last month or so when you're talking about long relief especially. It's, they kind of hit that sweet spot where Vance Worley was their primary long guy for a while, and that was working out pretty well. But, yeah, you cycle through the names. How can you be upset about bringing back Tommy Hunter? Now, do I want Tommy Hunter pitching in the 8th inning of a 1-run game? No. But if he's pitching the 6th or 7th inning, I feel better about him than I do Mike Wright or Despaigne or T.J. McFarland or Parker Bridwell. Just go down the list. Logan Undrusik, who was designated for assignment.
All of the guys my wife's like, what's his first name?
Exactly. And it does really speak to one area. As much as we've talked about the starting pitching, they've been able to find relievers over the last 4 or 5 years. Brad Brock was a nobody kind of acquisition that they made, and look what he became. You just go down the list, and not even talking Andrew Miller or someone like that, but just, even guys like Luis Ayala, guys over the last 3-4 years, Chaz Rowe had his moments for them last year.
Just
for about
a guy, right,
period.
Exactly.
They've been able to find guys to give them stretches where they pitched well. They just haven't found that this year. They just haven't. And then when you couple that with the loss of O'Day, they've really been hurting there. And of course, when you have starters who are struggling to even get to the 6th inning on most nights, to even get to the 5th inning some nights, it clearly is going to put such a strain on your pen that it's just, it's kind of crumbled. It's kind of fallen on top of itself, so to speak. So, can Tommy Hunter come in and do what he did for them the last couple of years, which was a solid middle relief kind of guy, a guy who's going to give up a long ball from time to time, but will also have some stretches where he pitches pretty well. Then, if he can do that, their bullpen will be better. But, it does really speak to the fact that they got rid of him last year, which, by the way, remember, that was a salary dump. They didn't get rid of him because they didn't like him. That was a salary dump, and it was clear because Junior Lake wasn't a real player. They wanted to save a little bit of money there, which you can certainly criticize them for doing that at the deadline when you're supposedly trying to win. But, he was decent. Maybe he can help them out a little bit here, and can't be worse than anything else that they've been trotting out there because it's been just a nightmare sequence of me sending out the daily WNST.net text.
If I go through that thread on my phone here right now, the list of names, the luminaries, as we would say, that have been a part of this, that every time the text comes through, I'm like, who the hell's that guy? Let's see, Julio Barbone, Oliver Drake, McFarland. I'm just reading through right here. There's Barbone the other day, Doug Druzik.
That guy was in the minors. I thought he was already in the bullpen.
Parker Bridwell. I'm just going back here. Mike Wright. Well, we've thrown him around a little bit as well. Elvis Dumerville's not on the Orioles, but Odrisamer Despaigne. I just got down how to pronounce his name. Now his ERA's 9.
Yeah. I'll actually say he was a guy for about 3 weeks back in, what was that, June or July, was okay.
Well, he had been in the big leagues, right? I mean, he wasn't first time to the rodeo, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it has just been a struggle for them, but, hey, this all begins and ends and comes back to you need to get at least, I'll take mediocre starting pitching at this point. What they've gotten, especially Friday, Saturday, and at other times over the course of this season when they've really struggled, has been far worse than mediocre.
He is Luke at WNST.net and Baltimore Luke on Twitter. He is Luke Jones. He covers the Orioles and the Ravens for us. He'll be at Oriole Park all week long, chronicling all things, maybe coming apart at the seams, maybe rallying and being in first place by the end of the week. We can only cross our fingers and look at these pitching matchups and say, God give us strength. That's all I can say. Miley and Estrada, Jimenez and Happ, Gallardo and Sanchez, amongst other things. I'm headed off to Germany. You can follow our journey on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, anywhere that the internet is served. And anything that you miss here this week, you can find in the Buy a Toyota audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper is served up at 7 a.m. to your email inbox via Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. You can get some inspiration at planetoftriumphs.com as well. And last but never least, the aforementioned WNST Tech Service. While sometimes you may not recognize the names, especially when the Ravens create some cuts later this week, it is timely, fast, and makes you the smartest sports fan in your community. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. I'm Nestor. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me, and we are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.